Greetings, everyone. Nick Ottinger here with Team Conti Sim Performance in Xfinity series. This week, providing iRacing Pro Track Guide at Richmond Raceway, week 9 of the Class B series. And as you guys see on the screen, done quite a few laps here. And you can see our 5th lap is the quickest lap for our hot lap. So, got to let the tires build up. Got to let temperature get into these tires so you can actually have some grip where you need to, some front positivity in turn, and the rear capable of the drive straight off a corner. So this week I just want to let this roll through for the first 10 laps and let this kind of have you guys dissect this with your own view, and then I want to give you guys some points of view of how I would attack Richmond and why it's important to adapt to a style like that in some circumstances. So with that said, I'm going to let this play through. Alright, closing up on 10 laps complete here. Want to actually dissect a couple of these laps so we can really focus towards some avenues. We need to focus on balance in the car. Now, lap 4 is one I really want us to go look at. You can see how it's getting quicker and quicker and quicker until lap 4. So you guys have a good understanding of how New Hampshire went with our car, on how you needed to balance the braking and not adding too much wheel input. And once you added closer to your max wheel input, you were trying to release the brake so you weren't pitching the rear of the car up and braking it more free, because the car wasn't making enough downforce. It was just really aggressive in that pitch change, right? So you guys had to mitigate that at a flatter section at New Hampshire. It's the same method at this track at Richmond. You're focused towards balancing that trait and mitigating that pitch. The more input you add towards the left with your steering wheel. So thinking about that, this is a sweeping corner that we have at Richmond for turn 1. And your focus is trying to drive as straight as you can into that corner. So any point that you turn away from here into turn 1 is very key. I would heavily rely on looking for these marks that you see in the red paint here, okay? That is a good marker for you guys to use if you're looking on the outside. And if you can't see that, try just judging, looking in this zone right here of where you need to get to your apex of the corner. And to preface that, this track has a lot of grip put in the left front, and that left front tire is what I'm specifically talking about, near that yellow line, okay? And you can create a rolling phase that's really good. You can create some capability to get to the throttle earlier and then battling for a straight exit. So sometimes you can undercut it, but focus towards looking for these markers here to turn away from this progressive wall that we have and really start shaping of angling towards the center of the corner, for turns 1, before you actually start cutting it down to the bottom lane near this yellow line. Once you lift, you can see I'm lifting before this. Essentially, it's the NASCAR logo, but they don't have a NASCAR letter in there. But you can see how I'm braking as straight as possible. And if I add more wheel input, I got to release it because I'm adding some counter steer. That's that pitch I was talking about. You got to limit that. So, much like New Hampshire again, you're limiting when you're adding wheel input. You're trying to keep the car balanced. You're not trying to take too much entry momentum away, because this track is very momentum based. And creating that rolling speed at the right time. In other words, getting off the brake and having a rolling phase of the car where you're not in the gas, you're not on the brake to slow it down. You're just letting the car work, and now your focus is shifted towards creating turn with the front tires, creating grip to the front and rear tires, and keeping it sustained. So you can see, slowing it down. Look, I'm right on this yellow line, right? And why this lap is important, I got lazy on this front and got it down too early and clipped the apron with this left edge. So, and I washed up. So I had the right mindset, but I got lazy in being precise and angling towards this yellow line at the right spot. Because now I have so much wheel input, I pushed it tight. Early on, I got the grip to sustain this. But later on, I'm going to actually have to slow this down, so I'm actually not cutting it too much. So I got offline here. I would say is a very easy thing to do, especially when you're focused towards wrapping this yellow line. And now all that did was I just pushed tight in the center. I pushed tight because I bottomed the left edge of the splitter out, got offline, and then now my angle's all out of whack for wrapping this exit like I want. It's delayed is where I got the front pointing, and now I can't get off the corner as straight as I want, as early as I want. So I lose about 1/10 of a second just because of that quality. So turn 3, here's some quality factors to look into, is where to turn away from the wall. I always start lifting and turning in this Xfinity zone, this black painted surface with the Xfinity logo on the wall. That's the general area I always start shaping away from the wall and then lifting. And then when I get to the brake, same qualities. We talked about it in New Hampshire. Have that mindset for sure, and making sure you're not adding too much brake pressure and pitching it too sideways before you even start adding more wheel input to get into this corner. Because all you're going to do is just pitch it loose, and then now you're counter steering, and now your balance is all, not consistent. So in this loading zone, see how much limited brake pedal I have already. Same thing, trying to wrap this yellow line, find that point where I'm creating, a rolling phase, and where I can get to partial throttle earlier to sustain some momentum, and then use that momentum and make sure it's forward momentum where I'm creating a lap time. So, something I do at this track, you have a center portion that a lot of people will underutilize and overslow, and then use too much throttle to get their speed back in this Geico restart zone. So they'll use so much throttle and push it tight, and then all the wheel input they have, the car will start unloading once you shape out of turn 4 past this Geico restart zone. And it's because you have an actual compression zone here where the car is actually going to compress in the rear, and actually once it does that, you're tracking out at that point. You're tracking out towards the wall. So you have a smaller range to make sure a line is correct and you're not pushing tight and then breaking the car free. So essentially, it's easy to have a push loose condition in this zone because of that trait I just explained. And that's just something we have to remember in a racing scenario. I love exiting this corner as low as possible. That way I'm creating that 100% throttle moments around this phase, right in between the Geico wording. And this is exactly where you start having that straightening effect of the car because of it loading. But if you can exit lower, you're not wearing your right rear tire out as much because you're not keeping it in that slip angle for too long. But you're also creating your ability to just open the wheel up and track straight towards the start finish line if you need. So you're not having a counter steer the closer you get to the wall. Very important just to keep a consistent balance. Same thing we worked at New Hampshire, you're working at this track. You're just trying to load the left rear wheel and the right rear wheel as straight as possible so you can drive straight as possible. Now, I'm going to let this roll through for our 5th lap so you can see the difference from lap 4 where I hit that apron and really hit my marks for my rolling phase. Let this roll slow. And here's a good point so you guys can see. I'm not on this yellow line by the time I get to this orange box, the pit exit orange box, right? I'm angling towards my car to be down on this yellow line, a good car length after. And now I'm going to get off the brake and have this rolling phase. Use partial throttle, drive straight off the corner, a little counter steer, but that's the tendencies of Richmond. Getting off the brake once I load into 3, partial throttle, driving straight off the corner. Okay, we talked about lap 10. I want to actually look at. You could see this is a tendency that will happen a lot if we are not thinking ahead of time and shaping it away from the wall. You can see how I got towards the wall, and this is a mindset I did here. I mentioned I'm turning away from this zone here, this first NASCAR logo that's on this red painted surface, and now I'm actually just driving straight to it, and that's me not being precise. And this happens all the time at Richmond. It happens all the time where now I'm in the wall, and now I'm delaying that ability to balance the car under braking. So I pitch the car turning away from it, aggressive, so I can get away from it and get to my line that I want on entry. But now I've convoluted everything. I've turned away from it, made an imbalance on the car. Now I got to use more brake to slow it down. And doing that, I pitched the rear up quite aggressive. So now I'm just going to get a little bit free into the corner. And now, since I regathered the balance of the car, I can get down to this line like I want. But all that cost me almost half a tenth just because of that, because I didn't shape into the center like I want to. And that's going to add into the rolling phase that I have in this corner, because I had to overslow the entry a little bit. I had to get the car balanced. So I just delayed some momentum I wanted to carry through the center because I was not precise on that lap, that corner entry, turning away from the wall. So took some speed away, and luckily had a really good 3 and 4 to make up some time of wrapping this bottom and then just straightening the exit. So that's 10 laps that we covered right there. But I want us now to go to some pace fall off right here that you see. You know, we're 22/8 by lap 30, which is 9/10 off pace from our hot lap. So now I'm going to go to lap 35 so you guys can see that, and let this play to lap 40, and then we can close out the video. You can see how I have a longer rolling phase than I did because my entry speed's slower. You know, I don't have all the grip to enter fast like I had early on. Cars changed dynamically. So I'm delaying my 100% throttle moments, and also I'm just getting off the brake a little earlier and letting it roll longer. Partial throttle, trying to drive straight off of 2 here. Getting off the brake once I load into the corner. Exiting low, driving straight off of 4. You can just see how the grip's just completely different. The rear tires are much hotter, slick with the rear grip. So I don't want to add too much throttle with the wheel I have to mid-exit, because all I'm going to do is just pitch the car free. So now my mindset is completely shifted towards exiting as straight as possible without adding wheel slip, especially to the left rear first and then to the right rear second. That way I can actually keep the car balanced. I have 2 more laps here, and that'll be it. Let's go in chase view now. See how important this yellow line is that I mentioned. Wrapping as much as I can, driving straight off the corner. Maximize my angle there. Exiting low and straight. And that's a pretty good lap 40, I would say, for this weather. So, and again, it's on a looser variation this week, so something to keep in mind, that you may be looser on throttle, and you may be looser at the peak brake pressure that you have, and those may be the only areas you're free compared to benchmark or tighter, because this track can change and it's driver induced on what you're looking, you know, to achieve at this track, and looking what you're trying to balance out. So that's going to do it for us this week. I would say pretty unique track. I love this coming to this track in Xfinity series, and I love when we come here with TCSP, and love seeing, you know, success stories that our drivers have, and can't wait to share some of those moments with you guys this week. So thank you guys. If you got any questions, please reach out. Only a DM away.